So our next test, we want to test out what's going to happen if a user is logged in. Now, if they're logged in, again, if we're going to be using cookies for authentication, we're going to have a cookie. And we're also going to have users. So when logged in, we're going to say we expect returns a 200 with the user. Now, before we could end up doing this, let's go over here. We'll say that we expect to get a 200, which we won't end up getting. But before we do this, we actually have to have some users in our system. So I'm going to do it before. So before all of our tests, I'm going to be optimistic and think that I have a data layer where I can end up syncing and seeding. It doesn't exist, right? This ends up breaking. But let's go over here and we'll say db equals require, go up one level, /db, and we'll start setting this up. So this is going to end up being our data layer. And we'll go over here. We're going to have some function sync and seed. Doesn't exist yet. We're going to have to export it. And we're still getting this error. But what is the sync and seed going to end up looking like? So we're going to have some models here. So I'm going to bring in my Sequelize. I'll have to bring it in up here. This is going to use my database URL. I'm also going to have Sequelize. Bring that in as a capital because we're using it as a constructor. And I'm going to have a user object. This is going to be my user. And I'm going to bring a couple things here. I'll say I'm going to destructure UUID v4. You don't have to do this, but I like to use GUIDs and a string. And I'm going to destructure this from Sequelize. And we'll go over here and we'll say for the ID, it's going to be a primary key. Its type is going to be UUID. And the default value is going to use this function UUID v4. And just to get started, we'll make this asynchronous. And we'll end up awaiting con sync force true. And let's just take a look here. Make sure it's picking up that change. Yeah, I actually expected this. So here, we don't have Sequelize. Let's install it. So we're going to need two things. Again, these we need as part of our application. And let's run this again. Okay, so here we see this database doesn't exist. Let's actually create it. And we'll see at least our database is getting created. Let's just add a couple of users here so we could end up getting started. So we'll actually have a data layer to test for. So let's go over here. We'll say a username is going to be a string, and a password is going to be a string. Keep this very simple. In any real application, we're going to want to encrypt and salt those passwords as we store them. But here, let's just create a couple of users. I'll say usernames equals, and we'll say Mo, Lucy, Larry, Curly. And we will do a await promise.all, and we'll say user.create. Let's actually just loop over the usernames. Usernames, for each username, we're going to end up mapping. We'll have the username, and we'll keep this real simple. We'll say user create, and we'll use the username, and we'll say that the password is equal to the username to uppercase. Just to get some users in the system, 2, 3, 4, and I should at least see here. Again, I'm still failing my test, but I'm actually inserting some users here. And let's actually just do one other thing here, just to make our lives a little bit easier. Let's actually do a little destructuring here, and we'll grab Mo, Lucy, Larry, and Curly. And just in case we want to use these values, let's actually return an object with these keys. These are going to end up being our seeds here. We could test this stuff out as well, but what we could end up doing here, we could put a let in for our seed, and before each test, we can make this async, and we could put an await here, and we could assign, not to seat, but to seed, these values. Again, we're still failing our test, which is okay, but let's just do a console log seed mo ID, and we should see some kind of GUID here, which we end up seeing. So now we've got some users in our system. Now we can end up focusing on using that model to end up authenticating our users.